certain sessions, particularly at 3:30 in the afternoon, and with champagne just afterwards as well. So there's a lot to live up to. And Clive makes it sound like I'm up for a fight. I'm going to be really direct. It's not that at all. I was sat up there feeling very nervous, staring you all out. And I felt with my new shirt like Braveheart, sizing up the English opposition, what was going on. So it's not that. I would like you to interrupt, heckle politely and put your own views in, because there are a few things about the next hour. The first is these thoughts are kind of researched. They are kind of formed. The fact is that, like Clive says, part of my learning and my company's ethos about learning is it's happening all the time. And what I didn't want to do was have this perfectly formed presentation that one of two things could happen. One, it's interpreted verbatim, which would lead to a horrible kind of national curriculum-esque thing going on in all your companies. And the second thing is it would make it really easy to shoot down some of the ideas in there before we've even really tried them. So I'm going to ask you to be as open-minded as I tried to be in putting together the ideas behind it. And it's also quite ambitious to say, we're going to look at changing how, what, and where we learn, but we're going to do our best. And if you feel that these examples are irrelevant, you don't quite see how it fits for you, then what we do is we use the power of the web after this event for you to virtually point out, I don't see how that works in this particular context, and we can have some fun thinking about it, writing some blog posts and reply to each other and extend the conversation that way. Does that sound like good value for money? Good. So, I thought I'd tell you a little story first of all. Last week, I spent about 40 hours in the company of some tech startups up in Sunderland. It's two things. It's quite a long time to spend with a bunch of about 20 young, hungry, mainly male entrepreneurs. There was one woman. The second thing, this was week 3 of a 3-month process where they had applied to an incubator, an accelerator for startups called the Difference Engine. These 10 companies from Russia, Estonia, Newcastle, the Northeast, Cheshire, they had all come together with products they thought would earn them $1 million. And then in the first week, the first 3 weeks, they've had between 60 and 80 different mentors sit down with them for maybe an hour in total, little 20-minute chunks each time, and basically destroy their business. Tell them why it's not going to work. Tell them all the competitors that exist that they didn't know about. Point out to them that there's a much easier way to do that at the moment. Point out to them they had no way of making money from these great ideas. It might earn you a knighthood, but it's not going to earn you $1 million. And these guys had two options. One was go back home with the tail between their legs, and culturally it was really interesting to see the reactions of, in particular, the Russian startups there. They don't do formative feedback particularly well because they have a great pride in their idea, and quite rightly so, and they would see formative feedback as criticism, negative criticism, rather than helpful. And for them, one of the biggest learning processes was actually just learning to learn again after many years of maybe not having that. On the other side, you had some companies that almost accepted the feedback all too readily. And so they thought they had to incorporate 80 different viewpoints into the product, which would end up with one of the most bland, can you imagine the bland product you would end up with if you incorporated everyone's views? And in this whole first month out of 3, they've only had 3 explicit moments of what you might possibly call teaching. And that teaching was on very specific technical things that they needed to know in order to create their company in the UK, things like that. So only 3 explicit teachings. The things that will make them the most money, they probably can't even remember who it was told them, when they were told, and what the discussion was. What will happen in 3 months' time is they will launch a product, and people will be struggling to remember how that product came to be. They will have become experts in what I would call lifelong learning. And you see it in other domains as well. One of the unconferences that I kicked off 5 years ago this year is an unconference for teachers by teachers called Teach Meet. And it started off with a couple of us down the pub, 6 of us in a pub, talking over beer about the things we thought were great. And it became this thing where quite regularly, maybe twice a week now, you've got 100 educators meeting together over beer to talk about what they've been doing in their classroom. And hugely powerful for changing practice. Very worrying when people from the Department of Education become interested in it. Because the whole point is it's informal, there is no certificate, and no, you don't have to pay to go to it. And then the third thing that springs to mind is that we're sat here, irony of ironies, in a conference. And my firm belief is the last place you'll learn anything new is at a conference or a course, except, of course, for this session. And those of my good colleagues. But the learning, I think, in all honesty, will happen out in the corridors when you meet new friends and you meet old ones and you talk about what you have been up to, that kind of peer-to-peer learning. So I want to start off today with a bit of peer-to-peer learning. I'm going to do, in good primary school fashion, a think, pair, share. This is a chance for you just to have if you don't know what a think, pair, share is, you're going to learn. But it gives you a chance just to talk through two incredibly important questions. And they're about your experience in formal education, call it school. That's the institution most of you will have been at to do your formal learning. First question, what were your happiest experiences as a learner? You don't need to write the questions down. You can remember. What were your least happy memories as a learner? I'm going to give you 30 seconds just to think in silence. And I will count those 30 seconds for you. And then what I want you to do is start sharing with your neighbour for 1 minute the happiest experiences as they come. Don't think too hard. And then I'm going to call another minute and you start with the negative stuff. And it's like therapy. It's much cheaper as well. Okay? So I'll keep a track of the time just for half a minute in silence. And this is really interesting stuff for all the people watching in video land. But they can do this too. I want you just to think yourself quietly, what were your happiest experiences as a learner and what were your least happy experiences as a learner? Go. With the folk around you, pick someone who looks nice and ask them, what were your happiest experiences as a learner? On you go. Now share your least happy experiences. Stop there. I used to work for Channel 4. So, normally at this point, because we would be doing a 3-hour workshop or something like that, I would get you all post-it note crazy and we would just cover that wall with your experiences. And it really would be therapy. But I am going to take a gamble, and I'm going to take a gamble at guessing what came out top. And you can give me like Darren Brown show. That's right. I think you liked these the most. Making stuff, I think, came out top somewhere. School trips, getting away from school. Contributing to something, following your own ideas, your own trail, your own passions, learning things that had a context you could relate to, and at last, probably not quite as important as all those passionate teachers. How spot on is it? Pretty good, yeah? This is because I've done this now with about, in the last 6 months, maybe 3,000 teachers. 3,000 teachers, all of whom believe this. And then I asked them, what were your least happy experiences? And this is what they say. How close am I with this? A frustration at not understanding stuff, generally in maths and science. Being bored. Not feeling that there was any help on hand, or a teacher that you were afraid to ask for help. Having no choice in what you learnt. Boring presentations from my politics teacher at high school. Not seeing why we had to do something. So, area behind a graph, Mr. Cooper. Why do we have to learn an area behind a graph? I don't know. So, how many of these kinds of things, again, came up in your negatives? Now, I think there'll be lots of other interesting ones that we didn't quite tackle, and if we can talk about them over champagne. But what's fascinating is that if I just hold that frame up there and ask you about your average corporate development day, and the planning behind it, and the way it's made up, do you see things in there? Ingredients that you recognise? And if I flip it back to the things that we all love, where are the opportunities for people to contribute? Where are the opportunities for people to say, I was a high school teacher, there seemed an interminable number of child protection days that I had to go on. I thought I had a big idea of what you don't let the kids drink alcohol kind of thing. The things that came out, though, I didn't have any choice. I just had to do what I was told most of the time. School trips. How many of you do school trips at work? So you get people on a school trip, in a bus, preferably, somewhere. Even if the bus is only taking you, in us, we took the bus to swimming every week, and it was a 3-minute journey. But there was the excitement of getting on the smelly bus and heading down the road, because it's a change, it marks a change in pace, a change in chapter, if you like. So I thought the results of these, because it was the same stuff coming up so often, there must be something in it. And the three things it came down to are they're really the wherewithal within this presentation, if you like. How we learn, what we learn, and where we learn it. And the second thing relates to a very short piece of research that emerges from sports psychology. And the sports coaching generally revolves around the practice that the minute a sports coach gets very stressed, they're not producing the results that they need for their team, something happens. Even if they're a great coach normally, they don't revert to the way that they were taught how to coach. They revert to the way they were coached. So you think about corporate learning, learning in schools, wherever learning's taking place, most of us work in quite high pressure places at some point. And what happens to any kind of learning? Well, normally it's the least urgent of things that needs done. And so what happens is we tend to revert, I think, to the way that we've always done it, because it's just easier, quicker, and it fits. And so what I'm going to do today is incredibly challenging, I think, for you as people who want to take forward change in your organisations, who may not have the word leader or change in your job title, but who are going to do it anyway. And the first one is around how we learn. Now, what was the top answer about how we learned? From teachers anyway, I don't know how it was for you. Making stuff, yeah. Making stuff is hugely, hugely important. This is a school. This is Gaver Tully in San Francisco, well, Montara, just south of San Francisco, with his tinkering school. And he gave me this video of 24 hours. The students had been given a challenge to think about reading. How could we make reading more enjoyable? And they brainstormed. They thought, actually, a thing that makes reading less enjoyable is that people can see what you're reading. And if you're a teenage boy in particular, and also if you're a teenage girl, you don't really want people to see you reading a good romantic novel. Or you don't want to be seen reading War and Peace. So they set about building a village on stilts. Because they thought a village on stilts would do two things. One, you climb up and away from the real world down there. Two, you can hide away and you can create niches in there. So they designed this out. They didn't necessarily do sketches, but they talked it through, talked what they wanted to do. And then through the process of building this, Gaver and his collaborators would harness moments to teach certain concepts. What's fascinating about this is that it goes on through the night. The kids pulled an all-nighter at school because they wanted the thing to be completed, and then the following morning they go about fixing all the things they got wrong, having tried to do it by torchlight and candlelight. And that kind of motivation comes when you totally own the project that you are working on, when it is yours. And it doesn't matter whether these kids were constructing a village on stilts, whether they were building a bogey car. There's a wonderful roller coaster made by 7-year-olds that runs on old crates, drinks crates. You can go on and have a look at some of the artefacts online. What matters here is that the children were doing two things. They were self-directed, they were collaborating, they were having to learn as they went along because they didn't know about force, about how you distribute weight. They didn't know about torque. They had to learn about all these things as they went along. And it doesn't matter that you can't spot the specific subject being taught, because these children are learning a lot. They're learning it at an age where they're not meant to be learning these things. I always remember my French teacher at school telling me that I couldn't say although in French. I said, surely they have a word for although. She said, they do, but you're not allowed to use it. And this was only because it uses the subjunctive tense after it. And that was for the next year. And she didn't want to have to teach me that now. So it's not learning by a particular stage. It's learning because your passion is there. And it's learning also by making and having lots of things available to make and construct ideas. Now, at the moment, this is incredibly kind of go-karts and suspended villages. And you might work for banks and stuff like that. So what does this actually mean? Well, this is a design company that you'll probably have heard of, IDEO, and this is in 2 minutes, 1 week of their work on a project. And I just challenge you to find who is the project manager, who is the senior exec, who is the junior, who is the designer, who is the engineer. It's really impossible to tell. And what you've got is that for the duration of this project, you've got a construction of understandings, of knowledge, of ideas taking place in the boards behind. And the boards get messier and messier and messier. And then at certain points, they clean them up a little bit. Someone comes along and orders. And then someone else comes along, maybe alone, and does another change, reorders it. They gather around in small, secretive groups to talk about just one little bit. They sit right back to get the whole overview of their project. The table, as the project goes on, it became very messy. The table gets cleaner and cleaner and cleaner as the project hits the wall. Now, there's something about having this experiential zone where everything to do with a project is visible to anyone who walks in the room. You can explain it to someone who's not worked in the project from the start. So you can have lots of new team members come in without wondering how you're going to get them to catch up. And it reduces the hierarchy simply to who has a good idea, who's an interesting idea that's worth considering. And this design process has helped them do some extraordinary things. This is the kind of environment in schools. This new technology that you're witnessing was implanted in a high school in the United States of America that won an award for its new technology last year. This is not that creative landscape. How can I mean, with an iPad or an iPhone, we spend our lives doing this, showing stuff to friends, comparing. This environment doesn't allow you to do that. I've been in quite large tech companies, and their offices just look like this, with added cubicle. This is a really innovative design, though. I know it's a very bad photograph, but this was a floor plan of a school in England. And I just challenge you to find the interactive whiteboard, or the board. There is no board. There is no focal point. In fact, the really important thing is behind the ethic in this design is that there are no more than 3 walls in any room, so that you are forced into talking about things. You're forced into using corners. If there's no focal point, you can't have someone stand at the front and lecture like I'm doing now. You're forced into conversation. And what it allows is things like this. This is a school in Norway, the Stovner School. And the Stovner School is magic because they don't do any lesson twice, apart from foreign languages. So mathematics is done in a kind of 3 or 4 hour bout on a Wednesday morning. Social science done on Monday afternoon. And they can do that because of the flexibility of their space and the fact that students are working with that sense of flow that we all have. And ironically, I think most of us get that sense of flow in our work when we're working at home, snowed in. Not when we're in an office. An office is designed for interruptions. And so this here is flow time. And it's where teaching does take place, certainly, but where there's a lot of peer-to-peer learning in communal learning spaces. And then on the other side, we've got this. This is the private, this resembles more like your offices. This is the private space that students go to in the rest of that time. It's the project space. So they can work on projects either alone in silence with other people, and the adults that you see wandering around are actually the teachers, and they draw on the teachers as and when they need them to help them get through a block in their project. And they can do that because they've harnessed the space that they have to change how they learn. Just a quick question. How do people learn in your corporate environments, or in your government environments, or in your, wherever you happen to work, in your universities? How do people learn? What space do you utilise? So, projects, you're talking to people, but I'm guessing you're having to go round and find them and talk to them. Or intrude their office, you know. You do internet research alone, and you use collaborative tools online if you're really switched on, but then do your colleagues. So we've got an issue there. We don't really have a great variety of space in that kind of environment, which makes thinking about changing how we learn really difficult. Take a look at this. Anyone know where that is? If I told you that these free-flowing, slightly playful spaces are in one of the highest-performing universities in America. This is Stanford University's D School. And just to give you a quick kind of tour, if you want to have a group discussion with people, rather than, no one has an office for a start. So what you do is you take your Lego furniture and you build yourself an office for the purposes of that meeting. And if there is no Lego block left, then tough, you'll have to find something else. They have this, if you want to create a small space, then you go and pick up a bit of wall and hang it from one of the many railings that are on the ceiling. So you can have a holy wall, so sort of just so that it's there, but it's not, so people can interrupt and suggest their own ideas. Or you can have there's a kind of more solid one. It's not actually in that picture. A more solid one that you can put up that has more permanence if you want to have a secret chat. This is their lecture room. There are 3 focal points, one here, one there, and one behind me in the photo. What you can't really see too well from the contrast is that the only seating available is couches on wheels, and these ones at the back, which are like garden chairs. If you had a choice between sitting in a garden chair or a couch, which one do you go for? So people sit in the couches, and it encourages people to be much more relaxed and more open with each other. It's very hard to be nasty like this, like we do in meetings, when you're slouched on a sofa with your teammates. And this is hugely important. There is actually a stock list that you can go and find off the D-School website to recreate your own prototyping kit. If you're coming up with an idea, even if it's an abstract academic idea, there's something really important about getting it out on paper. We generally tend to resort to paper, lists, PowerPoints. And what they try and do is, why don't you think about using some glue, some post-it notes, some J-cloths, some blue tack, whatever it takes to build the idea that you're thinking about, to map it out physically. Because the act of physically pulling bits together and putting them together is very different from poking at a PowerPoint on your computer or using an omnigraph outline. I told you I was going to take you into places you didn't necessarily want to go. This culture, though, is absolutely catching on in mainstream. This is a beautiful, beautiful object. And it's been made by a designer down the road in Shoreditch, which is why it looks good, in Berg, in the design shop there. And what Matt did was use a bit of simple downloadable software. I think this was Adobe Illustrator. He took the shipping forecast areas and the map, And he told a website that he wanted it shipped to him. He wanted it made and shipped, and said, I want these to be made out of wood, and I want the fastnet and Irish sea to be burnt into the wood in this typeface. And then 3 days later, it comes back. And it's a 3D prototyping. It's actually a Hail Mary made from the shipping forecast areas around the British Isles. If you're a fisherman, you could, instead of Hail Marys, you can give a fastnet or an Irish sea. And it was made using Ponoko. And Ponoko is how some of my friends made Christmas decorations for their tree. It's how school kids are making things. They call it your personal factory. You design your stuff. You can use freely available tools like Google SketchUp. You can choose your materials, everything from gold plate. If you live in the US, you have more choice, obviously, but they're wanting to expand the UK. Gold plate, plastics, materials, fabrics, rubber. And then the best thing is if you make something that's quite cute, you can put it in their shop and see if you can sell it to other people. So it encourages this kind of entrepreneurial why-notism. Why not make our own Christmas decorations? Why not make placemats that are individual, that are a bit quaint, that are a bit you, rather than buying mass-produced stuff? And these are 3D prototypes made by school children. This is now the norm, in Scotland at least, for most children doing things like craft design and technology. I mean, when I was at school, I designed a money box, I designed a bookshelf, because you could actually make those with the wood. But now with the way that you can take something virtual and make it real, kids are designing anything they want, and they're looking at ergonomics. They're making their ideas come real. And these people come into your workplace and are given a very narrow set of tools with which to express their understanding, their knowledge, their advancement. You go to university, the tools are rather blunt. In the workplace, what tools do you have to show learning? They're kind of narrow. I'm being so diplomatic. So what happens when you start thinking, instead of let's write this plan down, let's make a plan, and most of the making that you do is on paper. What happens when you say we're going to stop defaulting to paper, and instead we're going to start defaulting to always prototyping something, always making something to show the idea of? Just a quick show of hands. How many of you think that this is just not possible in my industry, my place of work? Good, you're still being open-minded. Oh, apart from them, those two people down there. That's cool. I want to show you this, just out of interest, because I like it. And I think it's a really interesting approach. When you start doing it, companies like IDEO invent ridiculous products. And I'll talk you through it a little bit. We don't have audio from the computer today. So this is in Prada in New York, and they've taken RFID radio tags and put them in everything. They've put sensors in everything. The staff have their own devices. The clothes have RFID hidden within the fabric. So you can see the catwalk, but you can also see how the same piece of clothing looks on different sizes of people. You can see what it looks like in different colours, what they look like together. Security's improved by knowing what's in there. The next bit's a bit scary. It's the dressing room that's just glass. So liquid crystal instead of a curtain. And if you're a guy, like I was today, buying a new shirt, I'll explain why the new shirt later. The worst thing is having to open up. What does it look like? Go back in, shut the door, take all your clothes off again. So this, you just press a button and it takes the liquid crystal away. So they've invented this. How do you invent that idea? This is my favourite of all.
And then one of my favourite features of the technology is the magic mirror, where you put on the clothes, there's a big display in the mirror, and you can turn around, but there's a 3-second delay so you can see what you look like.
So there's a wee camera that allows you to see behind you. And that gets a huge round of applause from an audience of innovators in the TED Talks. A bunch of geeks applauding Prada with their 3-second mirror. Now, I don't think it's possible to come up with ideas like this if you do it in traditional kind of learning ways, which is you go in a course to learn how to become creative. You do the creativity course, module 1, 2 and 3. You pass the test. Maybe you present a PowerPoint to your colleagues back at the office so they too can become creative. Not as creative as you because they won't have done the course. What happens here is that when you start looking at creativity through the lens of, as they call it, design thinking, you have these very distinct 4 parts. You have a period of immersion. The idea that anything goes, any idea goes. That's why this way of thinking about we're going to make something involves everyone in your organisation or anyone who you want to involve in your team, from the most junior member right up to the CEO if you want. The process of synthesis, which is where you try and find the connections between the ideas that people have posted, quite literally probably with post-it notes, but you also try and find the interesting oxymorons, the contradictions, the tangents that people went off on. You'll have noticed that I'm guilty occasionally of going off on a tangent. But tangents are where really creative stuff happens. Tangents tend not to work so well when every appointment you ever have is on the hour, every hour for Outlook Express. Because that's all basic users know how to do. That's why all my meetings are at 1:45 the hour. Because people think you've only got 15 minutes. You must have someone really important on the hour for the next meeting. So you reduce your meetings to 15 minutes. And then if they're really interesting, go off on a tangent with them for the next hour. And it makes them feel good because they think that you've dumped the really important person to spend more time with them. I've just given away all my secrets. None of you will ever have a meeting with me now, ever. Ideation. So you take these ideas that maybe don't quite hang together and you start coming up with these wild and wacky ideas. And how do you know if the wild and wacky idea is going to work? You build it. You make it happen. Now, traditionally, it's been so expensive to make things happen, but prototyping, as I say, remember those prototyping resources that were in the drawers? You can build a 2-dimensional prototype, a 3-dimensional prototype of what it's going to be. If you're designing systems, if you're designing a new degree course for a university, how do you design a degree course? You need to get all this stuff that you want people to achieve, all this stuff you want them to learn. You need to get all the resources you have to do that, all the value proposition that you as an institution bring to that course that makes you different from every other university, and you need to put it together in some kind of tangible form. And when you do that as a tangible form instead of a linear document or linear PowerPoint, you'll find that it's actually a lot easier to explain to outsiders, including prospective students, for example. And this process is called design thinking. And you can go and look at, you can go and buy a couple of books around it. I'm going to try and write a book before summer on it, plug. So have a look at that. Here's one way that people can make prototypes. Producing a film. This conference is producing prototypes in the form of those videos that we are currently filming here. This is a film produced by, I think at the time she was 18 years old, Rosa Maria Revucada. And she wanted to be a teacher. She ended up doing what she loves, which is being a film producer and teaching teachers how they can teach their kids to make great movies. And she filmed the first ever, in San Francisco, the trolley cars. This is the first female and black woman, whatever they're called, the woman who, the driver, the conductor. Wonderful 5-minute interview. But what made that prototype? That was effectively a prototype that was made. What made it go from prototype into product is what you're seeing all around, which is that it's showing off. So what they do is they take over this big car lot in the community. They put out a bunch of cheap seats. They turn on the lights, camera action, and the whole community comes to see these prototypes that the kids have made. It's called the I Can Film Festival. And it's really celebrated. Prototyping is celebrated. Now, if there's one thing anyone can do, I think, it's to create this culture of celebrating prototypes. Because when you celebrate the prototypes and the big bosses see them, the budget holders see them, it might be the one that you thought was least likely to succeed that actually is the thing that's going to save your company or save your institution. But you can't do it unless you follow that process of design thinking. Thinking about design, thinking about making something at the end that you can show. My view is if it stays in a document, or if it's in a document, it will stay in the document. Which brings me to the second of the three. This is quite a short one, because the what we learn is something that for each of you will be different. You'll feel that there are different what needs that you have. There'll be certain things you feel people just have to know, people just have to learn. So hopefully with how we're learning it, I've suggested some different ways of thinking how you might learn the same old content. But what would happen if we just changed the content as well? Now, I wrote an editorial piece, an opinion piece in the Times Education week before last. Headline: if you truly want to engage pupils, you could exchange that for people, relinquish the reins and give them a chance to learn by doing. And this is something I've been developing now for a couple of years, but you'll all maybe have heard of Sagata Mitra's work with the Hole in the Wall project. It's been going on now for 7 years. And with the Hole in the Wall project, he realised that if you just put computers with the internet in English and some well-chosen sites, well-chosen games, street children who are not in formal education will come up, they will come together, they will teach each other. And within an hour, they will learn something new. And above all, they're learning it through the medium of English. Therefore, they're killing two birds with one stone. Hugely successful in that context. And then we look at our own context and we say, it wouldn't work here. Hole in the wall learning. Just a quick show of hands. Who here works for a company? Hands up. Nice and high. Good. Who works for a government institution? And who works for a university? A couple. Okay. So those of you in companies, can you imagine just having kiosks of learning? And allow people to learn what they want? I mean, it's called the internet. Because all your staff have kiosks. There's no shortage of resource there. So the act of the kiosk was to put it in a communal area and let people go for it. The equivalent, I think, in corporate land is to give people the time, a guaranteed amount of time. It doesn't have to be a lot. It can be 10 minutes a day. It can be 12 minutes a day, concentration time. In this school in Auckland, in the North Shore of Auckland, they give students Wednesday to do what they want, every Wednesday. And they do these impact projects, they call them. So the only criteria is that the project must have an impact on a community somewhere in the world. And they do it. And my first question was, but I've taught 14-year-old Waynes. Boys are still Waynes when they're 14 years old. They don't know what their passions are. You ask them what their passion is, they'll say Glasgow Rangers. It's not really their passion. And the answer that came back was, you're absolutely right. A project itself might be 13, 14, 15 weeks of work to get it to final fruition. But finding the passion is the hardest part. And we've spent 3 weeks, 4 weeks with students on that Wednesday, just 8 hours a day with them, working out what it is they're passionate about. And when you've discovered the passion because their eyes light up. And then there's no stopping them. And off they go. And they recruit their peers to help them achieve the project. Some of the projects they've done, impact-based projects, students created a screen system, public display system to show the best work of the school, and unwittingly managed to undercut the local commercial operator at the university in Auckland by some $280,000 New Zealand dollars. And those high school students' system is now in the university in Auckland, not the commercial outfit, using open source technologies, no less. Another one was building a Herbie car to raise money for a local hospital. The kid built a car. Built a car. I think that's fairly impressive and teaches a lot about everything. The fact that he also managed to get this car sold in the United States to raise money for another foundation over there shows that there was something going on in terms of his English language communication, use of the internet to promote what he was doing. There's incredibly rich projects. It's just us adults who sometimes struggle to put the label on it. Yeah.
That's one point is we have just regular formal classroom training sessions, and sometimes feedback is, I've no idea what I learned. It was really fun.
Yeah.
I don't know what I learned. And so in situations like that, how do you explain to people what they've learned so that they can go on and apply that in another situation?
I think that's actually where the learning happens, because the students themselves have to look back at what they've learned. And this is good old-fashioned formative assessment. I would recommend getting hold of the PDF of Inside the Black Box. Absolutely seminal piece of formative assessment done by Dylan Williams. And what he outlines amongst the techniques, if you like, the tricks, is that at the end of a period of learning, which could be an hour, could be a day, could be 3 months, kind of depends on the size and impact of the project, you have to look back and say, what did I learn today? What did I learn yesterday? What did I learn that was new today? And in order to achieve what I want to achieve tomorrow, what am I going to have to learn next time round? And those three questions are really important. And you can use some traffic lighting to work out where you've achieved, so red, amber, green. But at the end of the day, learners have to be able to answer those questions for themselves. This is not the job of the trainer or the teacher to do it for them. And it's the job of the teacher and trainer to try and ease that out of them. Good questioning, really good questioning is, of course, the core skill of good teaching. And remarkably, few people practice it enough. So good questioning, and also having a place where it's stored. So that learning log has to be kept online. And I'm going to actually end, that's part of the where we learn, because there's a whole question about where and when does all that happen. What I wanted to show you, though, is that there are a lot of questions like that that need thought through and worked through. There's also a certain degree of just having to get on with it and do it. This is a comment left on the article on my blog. Today I found myself standing in front of my secondary 1 class and saying, so, from now on you have an hour every week to come to school and decide what you want to learn, whatever you like. No joke, there were cheers of excitement. I'd taken the approach of Sugata Mitra last year with the Secondary 5 senior school. It was interesting, but this time, like you suggest, the pupils are initiating and directing the learning. Now, there's a lot that's not written there, but I think there's a lot you can deduce as well. That there is right at the beginning of this project, there is a passion in this teacher that she's not had before. And there's a feeling of, I've let a genie out of a bottle and I can't put it back in, so now I'm just going to have to work this one out. And so I'm going to be working with her, and on my blog over the next few weeks and months, you'll see how it pans out. Look her up. She's got her own blog. She'll be writing about her pains and woes with it as well, Chrissia Smith. So the what you learn is about self-led. It's about following passions and finding what those passions are. And I think one of the challenges adults have is that quite often adults don't know what their passions are. If I asked you, kind of wine bar question, isn't it? A sleazy wine bar question, or what's your passion? But if I asked you, how many of you would do it? If you're into things like abseiling and hiking, you'd just come out with it. I do extreme surfing or something like that. But if you're normal, the other thing is that lots of adults don't actually read. A lot of adults don't read, and I'm going to ask you to be really frank and honest and experiment, social experiment. Put your hands up the last time that you read for pleasure. Cool. Hands up. That's right. That's exceptional. That is actually exceptional. You speak to most normal adults who aren't in learning, they don't read it. Let me ask you another question. How many of you play video games on a regular basis? Hands up. Now just look around. Because the national average for that is 70% of adults. You see what I mean? So there's a difference between you in learning and normal people. And that really is important when we're talking about what we're going to learn, because you probably think it's perfectly reasonable to learn from a book. Many other people believe it's totally reasonable to learn from World of Warcraft. We've spent more time playing World of Warcraft collectively as a globe, as a world, than the entire history of human evolution. Fact. I can't remember the numbers. They're in the bag at your feet. But I'll write a blog post on it. Absolutely fascinating. These kind of games are... am I on? Let's see if I'm on the interwebs. I'm aware that we've got 10 minutes left, and I've got one more point I'd love to make. But the other thing is that I'll just let me try this. Oh, it's going to ask me to pay money. I think I don't do that. Right, hold on. I'm going to show you something else instead. Have you come across the granny cloud? Because this is a crucial part of what you brought up in terms of how do we know. And it relates to what we've just been talking about as well in terms of finding one's passions. I trust you all had a granny at some point. And what do grannies do best? They talk. They give you sweets, yeah. But they also talk to you. And what do they say to you when, in your case, trying not to judge the room on its age too much, it was when you first showed your grandmother a video cassette recorder working. So what was her reaction when she saw that? Or what was her reaction when you tell her what you do for a living? Maybe it's your mother's. You tell your mothers what you do for a living. What do they say at Christmas dinner? Don't understand. It's very clever, I'm sure. But I don't understand. And that's the role of the granny. The granny is hugely important. And the Granny Cloud is Sugata Mitra's next project. He's got these grannies all over the United Kingdom. Grannies have time. Hair colouring as well, quite clearly. And they also have this natural ability to know nothing, yet know everything. They have the wisdom to be able to put things that you're doing in a context, even if they don't understand it entirely. And they have the ability to say, wow, that's really impressive. I don't really get it. Maybe you could explain it better next time, but that's fascinating. Now, what happens when your granny or your mum doesn't really understand what you do? You try and explain it better. You become a teacher. You try to get under it more. And so the Granny Cloud is a fascinating kind of social experiment, if you like, in just what we're talking about. So I'm going to let you learn whatever you like. What's the role of the teacher? The role of the teacher is almost to act like Granny and to kind of ask the kid to explain how they got to where they had got. Or in your case, ask your employees, your peers, how did you get where you got to? I'm going to end with the where. Where do we learn? Way back when, 2005, 2006, I helped instigate a project in East Lothian, Scotland. This is to show you where Scotland is, just in case you forgot. Lots of audiences elsewhere in the world who wouldn't maybe know. Very mixed area, very rural. Again, next to some very, what you might call inner city areas. So this is, the reason I'm showing you this is to show that what we did there could be done in any environment. It could be done on Millionaires Row over here. It could be done in ex-coal mining communities where you don't think you have a lot of digital savvy. It could be done in some of the richest areas in the country, North Berwick, Dunbar, where you have certain chattering classes who disapprove of the internets and the YouTubes and the Facebooks. But what do? We set up a very easy to remember domain called edubuzz.org. We bought a server for $2,000. We now just host everything out there in the cloud because it's cheaper. And we encourage people to start any site that they wanted to. They just had to go on, put their name in, and start writing, sharing what was going on in classrooms. And what we discovered, this one was during some of the snow recently, is that teachers undertook it initially, we thought, to talk to other teachers. Actually, it wasn't to talk to other teachers, it was to talk, well, that was what they wanted. The number one audience ended up being parents who wanted to see what was going on inside the classroom. It became a prime communication tool. Some of our 7-year-olds found themselves making internet history, stored on the Internet Archive forever, so that whatever they were sharing about their learning was stored forever. They could go back and reference it. They were creating a lifelong learning kind of portfolio, if you like. Even the Director of Education talked about how he wanted to try and engage communities in new kind of ways. When we started out, we only had 20 people out of maybe 1,500 teachers and managers, if you like, taking part. When we started with a name that people could remember, it immediately led to growth. Name is very important. Findability is very important. And we also, you'll notice, Scottish schools go on holiday in July and August. And what you'll notice is that June, July and August are the 3 busiest months of the year. So this was engaging people outside the formal setting of school. We then ended up with about 350 by the end of the first year. 350 people sharing what they did day in, day out, at least once a week, very often every day. It could be they took a photograph, it could be they wrote a quick post. It's now more like 1,300, 2,000 odd. It serves 3.5 million pages every month to 300,000 unique visitors. There are a lot of people looking to see what goes on inside classrooms there. How are people learning? What is it they're learning? Where are they learning? And it was really interesting during some of the snow days that we had. If I just This is the severe weather closures. You can see where the severe weather kicked in because it's right here at the end. These were not, do not kid yourself that these were kids looking for work to do because they were bored. They were looking for the community of school, which they didn't have because of that remote kind of place where they stayed. And they were using the blogs as a means to communicate with each other and talk to each other. Community is incredibly important, but community is not held within your classrooms or within your offices. It's got nothing to do with the physical space of work. Community is something you kind of feel, isn't it? And so the where, and it's incredibly infuriating perhaps for some of you, the where has nothing to do with location. I could labour the point by saying it's about smartphones and learning anytime, anywhere, but it's actually, I think, to do with community. Now, we know that good learners tend to be reflective, but for someone to reflect doesn't make them a good learner. You have to kind of teach people, coax people, facilitate people, help them understand what makes a good share. The way we did it was a policy of invitation. This was not a 3-line whip that everyone had to do. It was a, this will make you feel good. This will make your life easier. It will make it enjoyable for other people. And of course, mobile is important. There are 426,000 mobile phones thrown away in the United States every day. Every day. And they're throwing these phones away because they want the latest one. They want the one that accesses the web just like their laptop did or their computer. In countries like Africa, India, they're just leapfrogging the whole notion that you would ever reinvest in a laptop or desktop computer. Because mobile is pennies to use and gives them the same access, and they can access it anytime, anywhere. And you've got that happening now in learning environments. You get it in corporates as well, where people snap bits going on around the workplace that could be of interest to peers, and they publish them up. And you can put it as a secret Twitter account that only employees can see, sort of check it out, or you can put it out to the public and say, you know, what we're doing might be of interest to you as well. But why not share the process of learning that goes on? This is great for what did I learn today and what do I need to learn tomorrow. Most 5-year-olds forget what they learned yesterday, but so do most 55-year-olds. And so being able to capture it, get it up there so they can refer back to it and remind themselves what they might do is useful. I'm just going to... You can build it on existing social networks, of course. There are first graders, 6-year-olds using Facebook through their school to communicate with parents. Totally safe, very well founded, and not making that weirdness between work and social online accounts. It appreciates that for most people, normal people, not working in learning and development, that's a normal thing, that your work life and your personal life just kind of blend. So, what I want to do, I'm just going to, sorry, I know what's going there, is finish on an important point. And it's about skills and the ability to do that. A lot of people say, we couldn't do that because our staff are too old, our staff have been around too long, they're stuck in their ways, they won't do it. My friend Mike Coulter had a lovely expression. It's not about being young, it's about being youthful. And that attitude about youthfulness stretches right back to the design thinking that I was talking about at the top of the hour. And the reason it's about being youthful is I'm a languages teacher. I'm a French and German teacher by trade. And when you learn a language, and if you're a linguist, you'll be familiar with this, we think of language as kind of 2 icebergs. One iceberg is your cognitive academic language proficiency, how to write an essay. And the other is basic interpersonal communication skill, how to make friends over a drink, or how to make friends in a playground. And they share the same basis, but you use different outputs for different audiences. So when I was teaching kids in Drumchapel who had come off the plane from over 80 different countries, we had them in one classroom, they struggled with academic language, but you should have seen them on the football pitch. They learnt that basic interpersonal communication skill like there was no tomorrow, and they were as rude as their counterparts from Drumchapel. What we've got is effectively adding on to that shared literacy and shared language is a growing iceberg of other types of communication. But they share the same ethics, the same ethos that we've used for other forms of communication, sharing and collaboration. So we shouldn't be afraid of them. I think that it's too easy to say to people, don't be afraid, just go and do it. But I'm hoping that you can see the connection between this. and an attitude that permeates through something like design thinking, where in that immersion process, everything is game, nothing is wrong. And you'll wheedle things out, you'll find the good ideas as you go along. And it's cheaper. There's research showing that using these kind of collaborative online technologies to reinforce collaborative offline technologies, you need both. You could save 35 grand on your average secondary school. It's made up of about half on learning platforms and content stuff. That if you collaborate, you tend to need to purchase less. It's funny that, isn't it? If you talk to each other, you don't need to go and buy the book. If I tell you the synopsis of Flow, then you don't have to work your way through it. You can choose to later, but it's your call. 11 on desktop hardware and software, because you can start just saying to people, use your smart. If you've got an iPhone, use it. It's better than the laptop that we've provided you with, for example. And administrative systems become cheaper because you need to administer less. If you empower people to go through a design process, and you know that the process will catch them and keep them moving forward, then you don't need to administer quite so much. You don't need to manage quite so much. You can reduce it. And another one is just using the cloud. I was astonished by this. In New South Wales, they do a science test, the ESSA science test. It cost them before $200,000 a year to administer this test electronically. And when they switched it all to the cloud, the cost went down to $500 because they turned it on at 5 a.m. and turned it off at 5 p.m. and then didn't use it for another year. So there is huge scope in using these technologies. They are more robust than the systems you have in place. Above all, the attitudes that we're talking about are more robust than the overmanaged systems that many of us have in place. People tend to look after people. Systems tend to break down, especially when the managers leave for a promotion or a better job. And sharing information allows great things to happen. The United States government shares a ton of information. It doesn't really know how people are going to harness it. You'll all be familiar with that map. That's the oil spill. I saw it so many times in the news, I didn't have a clue what it meant. But by publishing the data every day on the density, the longitude and latitude of that oil spill, someone was able to design a site that when I logged on, worked out where my IP address was, and then showed me the scale of the oil spill over the top of my house. And so giving that information away for free, but not really knowing the prototype that's going to come out at the end, led to something that was much more powerful than any press release that Obama could have done. So being more public, having the benefit of the doubt, but putting in place loose systems that allow people to be creative and build prototypes to show their learning is hugely valuable. I'm going to finish because I can hear applause and it ain't for me. The absolute core message to take away, I'd hope, from this session is that this is about developing autonomous learners. People who, in an ideal world, don't need you. Now, autonomy is about more than providing a self-service. Because the yet is where your learning comes. None of these ideas are fully baked. All of them are ready to be taken off, the recipes fiddled with, new ingredients added by you. I wonder how many of us are going to actually share what we get up to with each other. I can tell you based on normal averages, it's about 4% of you. So 2 people in this room will actually go through with it and reap the benefits, and the rest of you will come back next year and I'll ask you, what did you learn yesterday? What do you need to learn today in order to do what you want to do tomorrow? I hope that you can absolutely prove me wrong on that. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think that's it for this afternoon.